Hello and welcome to this week's YouTube video. Every 4 weeks I do a Procreate video where I try and transfer my fine art painting skills to Procreate. This week I thought I would show you how I painted this tabby cat. I love the expression on this cat's face. They look a little annoyed by something and I wanted to try and capture that in a painting. Before I show you the time-lapse video, let's have a look at the brushes I used. The most important thing to note is that all your brushes must make different marks to make the painting look interesting. The brushes were the wet acrylic, the turpentine brush, 6B compressed, charcoal block, 6B pencil and Derwent pencil. This is the reference photo that I used. I'll change the background to something a bit more neutral so the focus is on the expression. Let's now have a look at the video and I'll speak about the decisions I made as I go along. To make sure I get my drawing correct, I'm going to draw around my reference photo on a separate layer and then place this at the top of my layers panel. I use this drawing as a guide to toggle on and off during the painting to check my drawing is correct. I've done this painting over 8 layers. Generally, I'm just starting a new layer when I get to a point in the painting where I either like what I've done and don't want to risk losing it, or I need to start a new layer due to the brush I'm using. Bearing in mind, wet brushes drag up pixels from underneath. If I want to limit this effect, I will need a new layer. I'm choosing a neutral grey as my background colour in the dark blue colour picker. I've chosen blue-grey because my cat's coat is carrying orange-brown. Orange and blue are opposite colours. Opposite colours look great when placed next to each other. I'm using the turpentine brush and turned up the size so I can make some confident strokes. The aim is to try and create movement in my edges between the cat and the background at this stage. I'm using a darker blue-grey in the ears and an orange-grey down in this area. Notice how this area under the chin is a darker value than this area on the face. I am going to start blocking in my cat's fur in this darker value. I will then work up to the lighter value that you see on the face. So I am working darker to lighter. I am using a combination of brushes, the wet acrylic on about 80% opacity. I'm then switching to the charcoal block at about the same opacity. Notice at this stage how I have a variety of marks already on my cat. I'm really concentrating on losing a lot of those edges around the outside of the cat. The key to a loose painting is to lose edges where you can. Decide what it is you are trying to paint, and if the edge does not help describe this, try and lose it. Here my important edges are that shape along the ear, my eyes, nose and mouth. Everything else is unimportant, so I can lose it. Notice how undefined those edges are. I have my darker values bleeding into my background. This helps give the illusion of a lost edge as I am graduating from my darker values to my lighter values. If we look at the reference photo again, you can see a reflection of a yellow-green under the cat's chin, with this side being more orange and this side being a cooler blue. I am therefore selecting my greys in the orange, green and blue colour picker depending upon what I think I see. Bear in mind your brushes all behave differently. The wet brushes always give me a lighter value than what I have selected in my colour picker. They are not as true as some of the other brushes I am using, so you may need to compensate when you are selecting your colour and go a little darker and a little more saturated. Just bear that in mind. For the detail around my cat's face, I am using my wet acrylic on about 80% opacity. Notice how I am using a variety of temperatures in my tabby fur. I am not sticking just to the orange colour picker, but I am pushing it greener where I want a cooler brown, or more yellow-orange where I want a slightly cooler, lighter value. Just as different marks make the painting more interesting, so too will adjusting your colours between warm and cool temperatures. If you are unsure as to what is warm and cool, this red is our warmest colour, and as I move along my colour picker, it gets cooler until I get to blue. Blue is my coolest colour. After blue, it starts warming up again until I get to a crimson red. Remember, everything is relative to what is next to it, so yellow can be considered a warm colour, but not if placed next to orange. If it helps, think of these colours on a colour wheel. You'll notice at this stage I am still blocking in my areas. I'm still not going right into the detail. I'm starting broadly with bold brushwork and gradually refining as the painting progresses. It's amazing how little detail you actually need for a painting to make sense. I'm switching between the turpentine brush, the wet acrylic and the charcoal brush. Notice that when I get to the really light areas, I just go in with a charcoal block and a 6B pencil on 100% opacity. There is no detail in that light area other than getting the values correct and the temperature changes correct. Notice how I go from a cooler blue-white to a warm yellow. For the detail of the eyes, I am using the wet acrylic between approximately 80% opacity to 100% opacity. Notice in those eyes, I have a temperature shift from a warm orange to a cooler green. I usually start a new layer for the eyes because it requires a bit more precision detail, and I want to keep this detail separate from my loose layers. If I go really close into the eye, you can see my brush strokes. They are not super blended, but the effect is still a glassy eye. It is the temperature shift and the correct values that give it this effect. I start a new layer for the whiskers and draw them in with a pencil. I then turn my rubber down to approximately 30% opacity and just gently rub out the ends. This is a simple way to create realistic looking whiskers. To recap then, the three most important things to get right in this sort of painting is your value. You must accurately represent how light and dark areas are. Your edges. Try and lose those where you can. Correct temperature selection is important. There must be both warm and cool temperatures in your artwork. If you get these three things right, the painting will work. If it's not working, then the issue will be with one of these things. Other things to consider are: start broad and then work up to your detail. Use brushes that make different marks. Understand that your colour selection is affected by wet brushes. You may need to compensate for this. I hope you've enjoyed today's video and found it useful. Please like and subscribe if you can, and check out my website sarahhallidayart.com, where you will find examples of my work and also details of online classes that I run. Thank you for watching and see you for the next one.